Welcome to Life Stories, where we share inspiring and heartwarming tales of kindness, hope, and unexpected twists. Today, we bring you a story of a young woman named Emily, who made a life-changing decision by offering her hard-earned savings to a struggling veteran in need. Little did she know, this act of selflessness would lead to an extraordinary turn of events that would change her life forever. Stay tuned to see how a simple gesture of kindness can create ripples of impact. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's incredible journey. It's often said that our dreams come from our hearts. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes those dreams come with a price. A price that might be too heavy for any young person to bear. Especially when the weight of the world feels like it's pressing down on your shoulders. My name is Emily, and this is the story of how one small act of kindness changed my life in ways I could never have imagined. It wasn't always easy, this dream I had. I wasn't born into a wealthy family or surrounded by people who had endless resources. But I always knew one thing deep in my soul. I wanted to create something of my own. Something real. Something that would allow me to stand on my own 2 feet. I loved baking, and from the moment I was old enough to hold a spoon, I was in the kitchen with my mom, watching her knead dough, shaping it, coaxing it into the most delicious pastries. There was magic in it, and I wanted to share that magic with others. But the road to that dream was far from simple. As a college student balancing long hours of studying with part-time jobs, money was always tight. My parents worked hard every day to keep our family afloat. My father labored on construction sites, his hands rough with calluses, his back sore from the long hours, while my mother worked as a cashier at a local store. They did what they could to help me, but at times, it felt like there was never enough to go around. I had an idea, a vision of starting my own little coffee and pastry cart. It wasn't going to be a fancy cafe or a high-end restaurant. No. It was something simpler, something that could grow with me. A cart I could push around, setting up in busy parks or outside office buildings, where the people were always on the move. I could offer freshly baked pastries, warm coffee, and lattes to those who needed a quick pick-me-up. This was my dream, and for months, I saved every penny I could, borrowing a little from my parents when necessary, but always with the promise that I would pay them back once my business took off. It wasn't much, just $1, but it was everything to me. It was the last bit of savings I had after scrimping and saving from every odd job. Every paycheck, every tiny sacrifice. I had carefully planned out every detail of the cart. From the traffic hotspots to the perfect hours for business. I had perfected the recipes, gotten the permits, and now, all I needed were the supplies. With the last of my money, I made my way to the store, my heart racing with anticipation. This was it. This was the beginning. As I walked through the aisles, I couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose. Each item in my cart had a reason for being there. The bulk bag of espresso beans, my biggest expense, but necessary. Flour, sugar, butter, and yeast, staples for any baker. The specialty ingredients for my pastries, chocolate, vanilla extract, and assorted nuts, milk, cream, coffee cups, lids, and filters. I was trying to be smart, making sure every dollar counted. My cart was starting to fill up, and I knew that the moment I checked out, my dream would officially begin. $980. I was cutting it close. But I was almost there. One last thing. Wax paper to wrap my pastries in. I pushed my cart down the aisle, scanning the shelves, when I heard a voice nearby. It was quiet but persistent, and it caught my attention. An elderly man was standing at the pharmacy counter, his posture straight and disciplined, his face lined with the weight of age. I couldn't see much more of him at first, but there was something about the way he carried himself, a quiet dignity that resonated with me. He was speaking to the pharmacist, a young woman in a crisp white coat, his voice calm but tinged with frustration. "You're saying this is after insurance?" he asked, his tone even but strained. The pharmacist nodded apologetically. "Yes, sir. Your insurance covered part of it, but the remaining balance is $1.200. The elderly man sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't have that kind of money. Not right now. His voice cracked, and I could see the toll that life had taken on him. He pulled out his wallet, his fingers trembling as he sifted through the worn bills inside. After a moment, he placed $200 on the counter. This is all I've got. Is there anything you can do? The pharmacist looked at him sympathetically. I wish I could help. But the price is set by the manufacturer. This is the lowest it goes after insurance. The man exhaled slowly, pressing his lips together as if trying to push down some overwhelming emotion. He hesitated, looking down at the money in his hand, then placed it back into his wallet with a heavy heart. I could see his shoulders droop as he took a step back, the weight of his situation sinking in. I need this medicine, he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Diabetes and a few other things. My wife, her treatments took most of it. His voice wavered slightly. You take care of the people you love first. I stood frozen, pretending to check the items on the shelf nearby. But I wasn't really looking at anything. My eyes were fixed on the man. His worn clothes, his tired eyes, and I understood, more than I'd like to admit. He wasn't asking for help. He wasn't pleading. He wasn't trying to manipulate anyone. He was simply someone who had given everything for others. And now, he was left to scrape together what little he had left to survive. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Without overthinking, I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. Excuse me, sir, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The man turned, surprised. His eyes were sharp, but tired, as if he hadn't expected anyone to approach him, let alone offer help. Can I help you? He asked. His voice hesitant. I overheard what you said about the medicine. I said, my voice trembling slightly. How much more do you need? The man paused, studying me for a moment, as if trying to decide whether to trust me. Finally, he answered, $1. His voice was resigned. Medicine isn't really a choice. I felt my stomach knot. $1,000. That was all I had saved. All I had left for my dream. My business. But I didn't hesitate. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Not as an old man in need, but as someone who had fought for others. Someone who had sacrificed more than I could ever imagine. I made a decision then. One that would change everything. Can you wait here for just a minute? I asked, my voice steady but full of emotion. He nodded, unsure, but he stayed where he was. I turned away, my heart in my throat. I walked quickly down the aisle, the weight of my choice settling into my chest. Each step felt like a lifetime. I could feel the tension in my chest as I moved down the aisles. But I didn't slow down. I was walking away from the cart. From the dream that had taken me months to save for. I had worked hard for this money. And now, here I was, about to give it all away to a stranger. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The veteran needed it more than I did. My dream, my business, could wait. He was standing there, fighting for his life and his dignity, while I had the luxury of a future full of possibilities. I wasn't even sure where this decision was coming from. It just felt right. I reached the shelves, and I began placing everything back, one by one, trying not to think too much about it. I returned the large bag of espresso beans first. The very thing that had made up most of my budget. The flour, the sugar, the yeast, all of it went back. Each item returning to its place as though it were never meant for me. My heart was racing in my chest. But my hands were steady. I knew this was the right thing to do. As I moved toward the checkout counter, a cashier glanced up, noticing my empty cart. Changed your mind? He asked casually. I didn't answer him. There was nothing to say. The veteran was still standing there, just as I had left him. His shoulders were slumped a little, the weight of the world pressing down on him. But he was still waiting. He hadn't moved. I walked over to him without a second thought and reached into my purse, pulling out 10 crisp $100 bills. Without a word, I extended them to him, my hand trembling slightly as I offered the money. The veteran blinked, surprised. His eyes moved from the money to my face, as if trying to make sense of what was happening. Please, take it, I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. It's yours. You can buy your medicine now. His gaze shifted between the money and me, his mind clearly struggling with what was happening. Miss, I can't accept this, he stammered, his voice laced with uncertainty. That's too much. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. But I didn't waver. You served this country, I said firmly. You gave so much for people you didn't even know. This is the least I can do for you. His fingers twitched as if he was fighting an internal battle. But he still hesitated, staring at the money. But you don't even know me, he said, confusion in his voice. Why would you do this? Because you need this more than I do, I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. I swallowed the lump in my throat, feeling the weight of my words. I had never felt more sure of anything in my life. The veteran stood there, still unsure, and I could see that he was struggling to reconcile my actions with the reality of his life. This money, he said, almost as if asking himself. It's not just extra cash you had lying around. Is it? What was it for? I hesitated for just a moment, unsure if I wanted to say the words aloud. But it was the truth, and I couldn't lie about it. I was saving to start a small coffee cart, I told him, my voice soft. My own business, something I've dreamed about for a long time. His eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in them. He shifted on his feet, and his voice tightened as he spoke again. And you're giving it up for me? It's just money, I replied, the words coming more easily now. Your health is more important. You can't live without your medicine. I can start over. For a long moment, the veteran didn't move. Then, slowly, his hands trembled as he reached out and took the money. His fingers closed around it, his grip tightening as if he were afraid it would disappear. He let out a shaky breath, and I could see the emotion in his eyes. I don't know what to say, he whispered. No one's ever done something like this for me. I blinked back tears as I smiled at him, the emotions overwhelming me. I couldn't put into words what this moment meant, but I knew it was something I would never forget. He was someone who had given everything for others. And now, in his time of need, I could be the one to help. Just promise me one thing, I said softly. Take care of yourself. The veteran nodded, his throat bobbing as he tried to swallow the lump in his own throat. He pulled an old phone from his pocket, the edges worn from years of use, and looked at me with sincere gratitude. Miss, he said, his voice full of emotion. I don't know if I'll ever meet someone like you again. I want to remember this moment. I want to remember the angel who helped me when no one else did. He held up the phone, as if asking for permission to take a photo. I felt a rush of warmth in my chest. But I nodded. Of course. He snapped the photo, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He stared at the screen for a moment, as though trying to capture the moment, to etch it into his memory. Then, with a quiet chuckle, he said, I want to share this with my friends. People need to see that kindness still exists. I didn't say anything in reply. I didn't need to. I hadn't done this for recognition or praise. I had done it because it was right. And I knew, in that moment, that it wasn't just about the money, it was about what we give to others. How we touch their lives. And how those moments of kindness ripple out into the world. The moment I walked away from that pharmacy, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I had just given away everything I had saved, everything I had worked so hard for. And yet, as I stepped outside into the fresh air, I didn't feel regret. Instead, I felt a sense of calm. Like I had done something meaningful. Something bigger than myself. But as I walked home, the reality of what I had done began to sink in. I knew my parents would be upset. They had sacrificed so much for me already. My father, working long hours in construction, his hands rough with blisters. My mother, tirelessly cashiering at the local store to make ends meet. They had helped me save for this dream, believing in me when times were tough. And now, I had no supplies to show for it. I had nothing to explain to them but a decision that might seem reckless to them. My heart was heavy with the thought of their reaction as I opened the door to our small home. The silence inside was almost deafening. My mother glanced up from the kitchen, her brow furrowing immediately when she saw that my hands were empty. "Where are the supplies?" she asked, her voice tight with confusion. My father, who had been sitting at the table with a tired look on his face, looked up as well. His gaze lingered on me, the absence of any bags or materials raising more questions than answers. "Mia, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice more concerned now. I swallowed hard, the weight of my decision pressing down on me as I tried to find the right words. "I gave the money to someone who needed it," I said quietly. There was a long pause. My mother's face twisted with disbelief. "What do you mean you gave it away?" she asked, her voice sharp. "That money was for your business. Emily, do you realize how long we've worked to help you save that? How many sacrifices we've made?" "I know, Mom," I whispered, my voice breaking as I struggled to explain. "But there was this veteran outside the pharmacy. He needed money for his medicine. He had nothing left. He fought for us, and I just couldn't walk away." My father stood up slowly, his face hardening. "Tell me you're joking," he said, rubbing his temples. "You don't even know if he was telling the truth. People can lie. Mia, you don't just give away everything we've worked for to a stranger." I felt a lump form in my throat. The sting of their anger, their disappointment, was almost unbearable. They couldn't understand. They didn't see what I had seen, the quiet desperation in that man's eyes, the pride in his voice, the weight of his years of service. I didn't even hesitate. "Dad," I said softly, trying to make him understand. I saw how badly he needed help. He didn't ask for it, but I knew he was struggling. His voice, it sounded like he had given everything he had. And I couldn't just walk away. But my father wasn't convinced. He shook his head, muttering something under his breath. "You think you can trust everyone? He probably saw you coming and played you for a fool. Just like everyone else." I didn't have the words to answer him. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes. But I blinked them back. I knew I couldn't explain it to them. They would never understand the feeling of helping someone in need. The sense of doing the right thing, even when it cost me everything. And then, just as the tension in the room was at its peak, a low, deep rumble shook the house. The sound grew louder, a vibration rolling through the floor, followed by the crunch of tires on pavement. My father frowned and turned toward the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peek outside. "What is that?" he muttered, his voice filled with concern. My mother's face paled as she stood up from the table, eyes fixed on the door. The sound of military vehicles outside had both of them on edge. The rumble grew louder, more distinct. Soldiers marched in unison, their boots hitting the pavement with sharp precision. SUVs and armored transports lined the street. I stood frozen in place, unsure of what was happening. I couldn't believe my eyes as I watched them approach our house. At the center of the group was a man who commanded attention without saying a word. It was Army General Thomas Brooks. His uniform was spotless, decorated with medals and silver stars, each one glinting in the fading light. He didn't need to speak to make his presence known. His stature alone was enough to leave anyone in awe. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the soldiers stop at the porch and give a firm knock on the door. I felt a wave of uncertainty wash over me, not knowing what to expect. As the door creaked open, General Brooks stepped inside, his boots echoing on the hardwood floor. The air felt thick with anticipation. My parents exchanged uneasy glances as the general looked straight at me. He didn't need to introduce himself. His presence spoke volumes. "Mia Taylor?" he asked, his voice firm but kind. I nodded, unsure of what was happening. What could the general want with me? "I came to thank you," he said, his eyes locking with mine. "On behalf of countless veterans and their families." Confusion swept through me. "For what?" The general stepped forward, his posture straight and respectful. "The veteran you helped shared your story online. He wanted the world to know about the young woman who gave her savings to help a stranger." As General Brooks spoke, a wave of disbelief washed over me. My mind raced as I tried to process what was happening. The veteran had shared my story? Thousands of people had read it? I felt a sense of warmth spread through me. A quiet pride mixed with surprise. I had never expected anything in return for my act of kindness. In my heart, I had only wanted to help him, not seek recognition. The general continued, "Your kindness reached far beyond this community. It reminded so many of us that we're not forgotten. And now, we have the honor of giving something back." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. When he opened it, I gasped. Inside was a civilian medal of honor for compassion beyond duty. The weight of the medal in my hand felt both real and symbolic. Everything I had given, everything I had hoped for, had led me to this moment. But that wasn't all. He handed me an envelope. "This is a token of gratitude from those you've inspired," he said gently. Inside was a certificate for a full college scholarship and a check to help me start my coffee cart business. Tears welled up in my eyes as I clutched the envelope to my chest, realizing that my dream was finally within reach. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. As the general left, he turned to me one last time. "Never forget, kindness reaches farther than we realize." His words echoed in my heart as the door closed behind him. I stood there, surrounded by my parents' pride and gratitude, knowing that the simple act of helping someone in need had not only changed my life but had the power to inspire others. 2. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more inspiring tales like this. Thank you for watching.